The unthinkable has happened, and the entire world is struggling to process it. Kim Jong-Un, the man long considered Vladimir Putin's silent accomplice, has just unleashed a brutal political and verbal assault on the Kremlin. Not behind closed doors, not through secret channels, but in the open, on a stage lit with cameras, in front of his inner circle and the world. The reason? The staggering annihilation of nearly 400,000 troops in a campaign so catastrophic that even hardened dictators are starting to realize Putin's strategy is nothing more than state-sanctioned mass suicide. What you're about to witness is not an alliance unraveling, it's the total implosion of a predator-prey relationship, where the prey has finally realized it was being fed to the wolves all along. Kim Jong-un is furious, humiliated, and for the first time in his career, openly defiant against Moscow. And the details behind his sudden rage make this one of the most dangerous geopolitical ruptures in decades. August 2025. Moscow announces with fake pride that Russian and allied forces had successfully pushed into contested territories along Ukraine's fortified northern front. But beneath the bluster was a reality Putin couldn't hide. The so-called offensive had become one of the bloodiest disasters in modern history. Entire battalions were chewed up in weeks, reserves shredded, and casualty lists grew so long that even Russian state TV struggled to spin them. What no one outside of intelligence circles knew at the time was that nearly 80,000 of those losses weren't even Russian. They were North Korean soldiers sent under the pretense of joint cooperation. For Kim, this wasn't just betrayal. This was the equivalent of having his military carved up and sold to Moscow for scraps of outdated technology and empty promises of food shipments. And it didn't stop there. Satellite images revealed something darker. Russian commanders had intentionally positioned North Korean divisions in the deadliest kill zones, using them as expendable shields while Russian units pulled back to safer lines. The message was clear. North Korean blood would be spilled first, Russian blood last. By early September, reports filtered back into Pyongyang. Families whispered about missing sons, intercepted calls painted pictures of slaughter, and defectors smuggled evidence across the border showing endless convoys of flag-draped coffins. For a regime built on illusions of invincibility, the truth was intolerable. Kim convened an emergency meeting with his top generals, expecting reassurance. What he got instead was a wall of silence, broken only by the blunt acknowledgement that nearly half of his most elite divisions had been erased in under a year. The numbers were staggering. 400,000 total coalition troops lost in Putin's endless offensives, and at least 80,000 of those were Kim's own men, his pride, his personal guarantee of regime security, now vaporized in Ukrainian mud. The outburst that followed wasn't just anger, it was volcanic fury. Leaked audio from the session paints the picture of a dictator in meltdown, pounding the table, screaming accusations at Moscow, and demanding answers no one dared provide. "Our soldiers have turned into his dogs," Kim allegedly roared. "He sends them to die while he drinks champagne in his bunker." For a man who had once idolized Putin as a model of ruthless strength, this was a shattering realization. The Russian president wasn't an ally, he was a butcher, and Kim was his butchered fool. But Kim's rage didn't stop in the war room. Days later, in a carefully staged but emotionally raw speech, he turned his fury into a performance for the cameras. Standing in front of rows of grieving mothers, behind him a mountain of coffins draped in red and blue flags, Kim did something he'd never dared before. He named and shamed Vladimir Putin directly. Our soldiers were not honored allies. They were pawns, fed into the fire for another nation's war. This betrayal will not be forgotten. State TV broadcast the footage nationwide, and within hours, international outlets were replaying it in a loop. The spectacle of North Korea's supreme leader openly condemning Moscow sent shockwaves across the globe. This wasn't a private quarrel anymore. This was rupture, rebellion, and the start of a dangerous new chapter. Behind closed doors, Kim's retaliation was even harsher. He ordered the immediate suspension of further troop deployments, the freezing of joint exercises with Russian advisors, and the recall of surviving officers from the Ukrainian front. Intelligence intercepts suggested that some of these returning units brought with them harrowing stories. Officers describing how Russian generals laughed about using Koreans to soften the lines, soldiers abandoned without ammunition, and entire brigades sacrificed to cover Russian retreats. Every story sharpened Kim's hatred. Every returning survivor fueled his rage. But here's where the story turns even darker. Instead of cutting ties completely, Putin doubled down. Kremlin-controlled media began accusing North Korea of cowardice and incompetence, suggesting that the shocking losses were due to poor training and lack of discipline among Korean units. It was classic psychological warfare. Shift the blame, rewrite the narrative, and humiliate your supposed ally in the eyes of the world. For Kim, this was the final straw. The image of his soldiers being mocked as cannon fodder while Russia celebrated Russian heroism was intolerable. He lashed back not just with words, but with strategic moves designed to shake the foundation of the Kremlin's fragile alliance system.